Well, thanks for staying with us. As you heard from that report, well, ASUU leadership has since commented, appearing on Politics Today and telling us that, look, at the end of the day, it's whatever their lawyers say that they shall do. And of course, we have the privilege of interrogating that lawyer this morning, Mr. Femi Falana, the senior advocate of Nigeria. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
I promise you it's not an interrogation. It's
Thank
just... you. But you are an activist as well as a lawyer, so the cap fits quite fairly on you on this. First of all, to the issue of the court case, what's your reading of that judgment? I mean, definitely before a judgment can be proclaimed by the court, there have been evidences, presentations, and counter-presentations.
I have my worry about the decision, because I've had cause to warn over and over again that the industrial courts, the Industrial Arbitration Panel and the National Industrial Court should try as much as possible to promote reconciliation when matters of this nature are brought before them, instead of issuing orders which in the past were disobeyed. Because we want our courts to be respected and their orders. But when workers go on strike and an order is made asking them to go back to work without addressing the problem that caused the strike, there are problems. Last year, the National Association of Resident Doctors went on strike. And because of the nature of their work, we were asked to intervene as their lawyers. We pleaded with the court. What should be done in the circumstance? The court ignored us and made an order, thou shalt go back to the hospitals. And what happened at the end of the day was that the doctors refused. Okay? We had to reach out to the Ministry of Labor. Incidentally, the Honorable Minister of Labor and Productivity is a medical doctor. Can we go outside the court and sort out this matter so that we can restore services in the public hospitals? That was what was done at the end of the day. In this instance, the chairman of the pro-chancellor have come out to say, this order will not help. The students have rejected the intervention of the court. ASUU has rejected the intervention of the court. But for us as lawyers, our duty is to advise our clients in line with the provisions of the law. And I have made it clear to the ASUU. Your choice is to file an appeal if you are dissatisfied. And they are indeed, the lecturers are dissatisfied. We are filing an appeal this month. It should have been filed yesterday. But unfortunately, we didn't get a certified true copy of the ruling that was circulated 2 days ago until about 3 p.m. yesterday. So we are filing an appeal against the ruling of the court, together with a motion for stay of execution. In other words, suspending the operation of the order until the appeal is determined.
Perhaps for clarity, Mr. Falana, what exactly is the order of the court? What people just have on the front pages of the papers and in the media is the court has said ASUU should go back. What exactly are perhaps a few fine details?
No, what happened?
Because we haven't seen this.
What happened is copy. What happened is this. Again, I have practiced in that court for quite some time. This is my 40th year of practicing in the National Industrial Court. And I can say without any fear of contradiction that my law firm handles more labor cases, than any other law firm in the country. This is the first time This is the first time in the history of that court that we have been told that the minister can refer a case to the National Industrial Court without going through the IAP. Because the NIC under the current labor law regime in Nigeria is an appellate chamber of the IAP. So it's an appellate court. It is only when individuals are sacked that you want to challenge your employer, or there are intra or inter-union disputes, that you approach the National Industrial Court. The government cannot without going through it, because there must be mediation, conciliation, and arbitration under the law.
So it was wrong ab initio to go to the industrial court.
Of course. Now we try to explain to the court, and the court said, no, Mr. Falana, we'll look at that later. It's not about that. It is before you can establish a legal right in a court. No, before you can ask for injunction, you must establish your legal right. You must prove to the court that I have a right to be protected. So if you are in the wrong court, what right are you asking the court to protect by way of injunction? So that's what happened in the case.
If the court, just a second, Bukola.
That's what happened in the case.
If the court didn't agree with you at the time that it was not right to entertain the case in the first place, then who is supposed to reverse that error that you have?
No, that's the Court of Appeal. But at least we made clear to the court, we submitted no less than 6 cases where the same court has warned the minister consistently. You cannot come here without going through starting your case, without originating your case in the IAP. If it relates to trade disputes, the court so found that this is a trade dispute. The court found that there was no reference to the IAP. But the court, in its wisdom, decided to intervene. And the only way you can show your dissatisfaction is to approach the Court of Appeal, which ASUU has decided to do. And that's what is permitted by law. Yeah. So we can't take the law into our hands. I can't advise my client, disregard the court order, without following due process of law.
But if you're presenting this at the Court of Appeal as one of your arguments against the jurisdiction of that court to address the matter in the first place, what are your chances of a consideration by the higher court?
I cannot predict what the court will do. I can take over the work of the Court of Appeal. We're going to adduce arguments to convince the court that, and not just because of ASUU, so that in future, the minister will know the limits of his own powers. ASUU and other unions will know their rights under the law. And that is the essence of the appeal.
Let's look at the case on its merits, Senior Advocate. The story yesterday was that it was an overriding public interest that Justice Polycarp ruled, such that the students can't go back to school after having spent 7 months at home, and then the negotiations can't continue. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, for me, I haven't attended schools in Nigeria, particularly university in Nigeria. I am sad that we are going through these avoidable strikes where students cannot predict when they are going to complete their courses. But how did we get to this level? And I've been involved in the negotiations between the government and ASUU since 1992. And the attitude of the government is not to address the problems that led to the strike. In 1992, under the Babangida military junta, the government was directed university authorities to chase out, eject ASUU members who were on strike. We had to go to court. The court stopped it. Secondly, the government turned teaching, going on strike in the universities, a treasonable offense. We had to rush to court to stop it. In 1996, predictably, the Sani Abacha junta proscribed ASUU. We rushed to court. And the court ruled, the Honorable Justice Ajakai, rightly, ASUU has not been banned. The activities of ASUU have been restricted to the campus. ASUU doesn't operate on the street. So, instead of addressing the problems, successive governments go around trying to destabilize ASUU. The Obasanjo regime, because of ASUU. No, Babangida also deliberately enacted a decree to take ASUU and other senior staff union out of the Nigerian Labour Congress. The Obasanjo regime amended the Trade Union Act in 2005 to say, before you go on strike, you must have a plebiscite or an election. ASUU complies with that all the time. Before ASUU pronounces a strike, each of the campuses, the branches of ASUU, will conduct an election through their Congress. Should we go on strike or not? So they comply with it. The government is aware. But instead of addressing the problems, revitalization of the universities through adequate funding, improvement of the conditions of service of lecturers, so that our universities can compete. The government agreed. In 2009, an agreement was signed. We are going to spend 1.3 trillion to revitalize all public universities in Nigeria. We're also going to improve the conditions of service of university teachers. The Jonathan administration, since 2009, the Jonathan administration released 200 billion naira. The Buhari regime has released 50 billion. That's 250 billion out of 1.3 trillion. All the government says, oh, we have no money. But the same regime, this year alone, increased fuel subsidy from 443 billion to 4 trillion naira. And we are now being told that before the end of the year, that figure may metamorphose into 6.5 trillion. So where are you getting such money to fund waste and fraud? But when it comes to education, sorry, we have no money. I think these are the issues.
But Mr. Falana, it still doesn't, I think, address the question that caller asked. I am very sure that you have done that. Just a second. The worry is that students are tired. The lecturers themselves are tired. Federal government is flustered. The historical background that...
No, the government is not tired.
Okay.
Hence, this matter is not being addressed.
Okay, but now you...
It can be addressed today.
You gave a historical trajectory to this. Now, what exactly would be responsible for that position of government? I ask that because 1992 is about what, 30 years ago?
Yes, 30.
Now, the people who were in government at the time, be it civil servants or government officials, are not the same set of people.
No, some of them are back as politicians. Those who are in the military, they are back as politicians now. But you know, now let me also tell you this. If the government listens to ASUU, all these strikes are avoidable. In 1992, again...
Just a second. If you said just a while ago that the strike can be ended today.
Today.
The issues can be resolved today.
Today.
What are the issues to be resolved?
Okay. Now, in 1992, it's about funding. In 1992, they also convinced the government that we need to make employers of labor pay education tax, because those who are trained by the government, right, are employed by employers, including your organization. So it was agreed that there shall be 2% education tax. We were involved in drafting that law as lawyers of ASUU. The government enacted a decree to that effect. The 2% tax has now been increased to 2.5% tax from the profit of every company. ASUU is asking the government. This money is not being well collected. If you go around the campuses today, the only capital projects you are likely to identify are funded by TED fund, established based on the advice of ASUU. But what is the latest now? We have just been told now that the TED fund is going to be constructing, going to be building offices, edifices in the zone. Before you know it, it will be to have an office in each of the states. For what purpose? It's an intervention fund. Money is collected. You are asked to distribute the money. So you want to be erecting offices. Very soon, it will be contract bazaar. So these are the issues. In 1992, it was also agreed that all the federal government properties abandoned in Lagos will be transferred to a fund. Again, for the revitalization of the universities. What has the government done since then? Is to sell these properties to private individuals. So in as you are aware, you can get a property in Ikoyi today owned by the federal government for 50 million naira. Tomorrow you put it in the market for 1 billion naira. So this fund generated from the sale of such properties ought to have been transferred to a fund for revitalizing the universities. So these are the problems that the government have allowed to bottle up. If we now want to address this crisis, I think the government is saying, okay, go back to school, we'll discuss all these problems later. The experience in the past is that once to call off a strike in Nigeria, that is the end of the matter. The government will go back to sleep. No. And to call a strike takes a lot of efforts. And that's why workers are always very reluctant to call off their strike unless you address. Because in the first, why did you go on strike? ASUU had 1 strikes. The government ignored them until they now said, we have resolved all over the country to go on strike. It was at that stage the government now started, do we ban them? In fact, the latest, I was reading this morning now, is that the registrar of trade unions says it's going to withdraw.
That's where I'm headed. So what impact will it have on ASUU's agitation? That decision by government, or the proposed decision by government?
No, I'm not sure the registrar of trade unions has been well advised. Because he wrote a letter on the 7th of September. The government, some people, hawks in government, ban ASUU. But we have to come out to say ASUU cannot be banned for these reasons. And that's, okay, what do we do? Let's go and look at their accounts. Okay, they haven't submitted their account. Okay, they wrote a letter on the 7th of September. You have 72 hours within which to submit your annual financial returns and audited accounts. And ASUU, of course, made the deadline. The registrar refused to collect. And when that was brought to my attention, I said, please go to the post office and send. Because under the law, once it is sent through the post office, it's deemed to have been submitted. Again, by speed post. Government, post office went to them to deliver. Said, no, we are not taking. But yesterday, I think with the intervention of the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Waba, the audited accounts were submitted. So the question of banning ASUU through that approach is already defeated. So this is where we are on that. But again, as I'm saying, it is possible. I think the only area the government says, we are ready to continue further negotiations. Because I think last Friday, before the president traveled out to the United Nations, to New York, he met with the pro-chancellors and indicated that the government was prepared to consult all stakeholders with a view to ending this crisis. And the leadership of the House of Reps is currently meeting all the stakeholders. I think they have another meeting today, to also address this problem. So once we can all speed up this process offending the strike, and it's possible.
And in the process of addressing the problems, one of the reports today is that NITDA is saying that ASUU's youth has failed the test, the integrity test. Is it part of your, conducted by government? I think it's that agency, to be precise. And ASUU has been on our program many times to say that indeed their own payment platform passed the test. Is it part of your,
you see, again,
the evidence you're presenting in court?
Again, frankly speaking, these are issues that ought to have been submitted to the Industrial Arbitration Panel. Which of us is right? And you call experts to determine which of the platform will help the universities. But by the way, I'm sure you are aware that the government's own system, the IPPIs, it has just been revealed, I think by the NSA, that 45,000 cases of fraud have been discovered. And not only that, the man in charge of the accounts of the Federation, with the government platform, IPPIS, has been charged with the criminal diversion of 109 billion naira. So you can't say that platform is the best for the universities or the country. So the government will have to go back to the drawing table. And if you are saying the UTAS recommended by ASUU is not okay, let some experts, independent experts, make appropriate recommendations to you. But the government cannot sit down and say, embrace the one that allows fraud to be taken to the universities. I think this is the issue.
Okay.
The other one, the government is, we can't pay ASUU for being on strike. Again, I think it's important to make this point. If the strike is called off today, unlike other sectors of the economy, if the strike is called off today, ASUU will ensure that the syllabus for the year is covered. In other words, no student will miss a lecture, because they are going to have what you might call a crash program. No holidays, no weekends, lectures will be taken.
Okay. You raised
so
the issue.
They are going to work. They are not saying pay us for services we're not going to render.
Even though they say that they have continued to work irrespective.
Yes.
But, you raised the issue of the vice chancellors the other time. And a question I had always asked, Mr. Falana, is, would this issue have gotten this bad, even as far as government, if the vice chancellors, who are supposed to be like the governors of their universities, did their jobs the way they ought?
You see, they are doing their work. Let me tell you what happened. This regime, in order to avoid the strike, this regime set up the Jubilee Committee, renegotiation committee, because the Babalaki Committee had renegotiated and made recommendations ignored by the government. So that was the previous regime. This regime set up the Jubilee Committee. That body made recommendations, were thrown overboard by the government. The government again set up the Biggs Committee, Professor Biggs Committee. That committee completed its assignment in July this year. ASUU was ready to sign. The government said, no, we're not going to sign. That's why we're in this mess. So, for me, the government can just simply pick up the Biggs Renegotiation Committee report today. Summon ASUU officials, can we sign? And then the strike is called off.
If the government is refusing to sign bills, reports of committees that they set up, do you see a conspiracy?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I deal with evidence. So I don't engage in speculations. But I'm just saying, the government should be persuaded by Nigerians.
Because I like to decrypt government. When we say government, it's so big and vague and ubiquitous.
No, it's not big. You have the Minister of Education in charge of the affairs of education. You have the National Universities Commission in charge of the universities. So there shouldn't be any problem.
So should we give government some credit when he says that, okay, besides the 23% increase and 35% increase proposed earlier, they are committing to even increasing that?
No, they have to, because we're talking of paying a professor 415,000 naira in Nigeria of today. And the government now said, oh, we're going to increase it by 60,000 naira. When in Nigeria, I know councillors that earn up to 1 million naira per month.
Well, Mr. Falana, that and several others we will step upon when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Falana, there are many other issues to take you up on, but let me quickly ask this one. You know, there's the uncertainty of whether or not the federal government took ASUU to court or not. So who exactly took this case to court?
I want to believe that the government is embarrassed by the public reactions to the intervention of the National Industrial Court. Hence, the Minister of Labour, Dr. Chris Ngige, said, we didn't take ASUU to court, but he filed the referral on the 8th of September, signed by him. He signed the referral. So it was the Ministry of Labour that sued ASUU, that took ASUU to the National Industrial Court. That's the federal government.
Isn't it also interesting that, sorry, Bukola, that, you know, in the order, because we just received that one now, it's between the federal government of Nigeria and the Minister of Education. The Minister of Labour is not on the list.
No, again, that was one of the things I pointed out to the court, which was not addressed, that the minister listed 4 parties: the Minister of Labour, the Minister of Education, Attorney General of the Federation, and ASUU. But by the time the government filed an application in court, by some strange development, it now became 2 parties. And I told the court, under the law, nobody can alter the referral. And I gave a couple of cases to back up the submission. But I think conveniently, you know, the matter was not addressed in the ruling.
And the council that we hear representing the federal government is named as council to the federal government. So I really don't understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. As the council to the federal government,
so if it's not the federal government that sued ASUU to court, the council will be representing somebody else. No.
I mean, the minister was just, I think he was a bit embarrassed. Hence he said that. My learned friend, Mr. Igwe SAN, who represented the federal government, never hid. I mean, you can't just go to court and say you are not representing a party. The federal government went to court, to be honest.
Well, you referenced in your earlier conversations about how the federal government should have raised funds to meet some of ASUU's demands some way. Yes. You referenced the oil sector, and you talked about, you know, the fuel subsidy and all of that. So I'm wondering, well, perhaps to speak first to the issue of the fuel subsidy, exactly where do you think that is even going? At a time when just a few, I think about a month or 2 ago, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning was saying that our debt service, to service our debts, we had to borrow money to service our debts.
Even to pay salaries.
We're not talking about paying the loan itself. To service the loan.
Of course.
We borrow to service the loan.
Yes.
Not even to pay the loan.
Yes.
So where are we going? And now we're talking about an increment to fuel subsidy?
Again, the leakage in the economy through the fraudulent fuel subsidy regime can end today. On the 8th of August, 2018, the Federal Executive Council approved the sum of 17 billion naira to acquire software to monitor and track all vessels loading fuel in Nigeria, crude oil in Nigeria, taking them to wherever in the world. And the same software is to monitor and track all trucks or tankers loading fuel in any part of Nigeria and taking them to wherever. After that meeting, the then Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Dr. Ibe Kachukwu, announced to the entire nation, we are stopping this monumental fraud once and for all. We are going to acquire the software. It was announced. When I discovered a year later that the money had gone elsewhere.
So the money was released?
Yes, but not spent for the purpose. I wrote a petition to...
Not spent for the purpose,
yes,
purchase of the tracker.
The software was not acquired. So I wrote a petition to the FCC. This is a case of serious economic crime. No reply. I've just renewed the petition under the new management of the EFCC. And I got a letter thanking me for my advice. I said, no, I'm not giving advice. I want an investigation. Today, we are told we don't know how much oil is produced in Nigeria. No. The instrument in 2012, by the way, the Jonathan administration, after the protests of that year, set up a committee headed by Nuhu Ribadu. That committee recommended to government, you must acquire and install meters in each of our oil terminals. Up to now, the government has not acquired those meters for all the terminals, like about 36 terminals. So, and that is why some people have said, this is a sabotage from within. So why did you not install the meters? To know the number of barrels of crude oil produced by Nigeria daily. Why did you not acquire the software to track the ships and the trucks taking fuel, bringing, taking crude oil out of Nigeria,
out of the country,
and distributing, fuel. So, but again, this is not my own language. The current Minister of State in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timpre Silva, has said the fuel importation scam is a criminal enterprise. Those are his words. The Comptroller General of Customs has gone to the National Assembly to say this is fraud.
Speaking of...
the government can therefore install the meters, because today, our OPEC quota is 1.8 million barrels per day. We are currently producing 900,000 barrels because of oil theft. So the remaining 900,000 barrels, at the current price of about $100, we are losing not less than $99 million a day. It cannot be accepted.
It is not only the Minister of State that considers it a fraud. Yesterday, Pengasan was speaking at the public hearing by the House of Reps. Let me read what the president of Pengasan said. I can authoritatively inform this committee that men of the Nigerian Army, the Navy, pay their superiors to be posted to Niger Delta,
yes,
even when the former commander of the amphibious brigade in Port Harcourt was removed. Many of the men in the command resisted being posted out due to the lucrativeness of their operational bases. Are we alarmed as we should be about this revelation?
No, I'm not alarmed because I know it's been on for some years. I'm not alarmed. I'm only alarmed that the government has failed or refused to stop the criminal enterprise.
So what then do you make of the hearing, the Senate hearing on this, that made this revelation?
Nothing will come out of it. Because this is not the first time they are conducting such hearing. A lot of these proceedings are meant to divert the attention of the public. It's not the business of with profound respect, it's not the business of the National Assembly to really investigate these matters.
But it is
Once a crime is committed, an economic crime,
But the Senate...
that is turning the country into a nation of beggars. You call the FCC, you call the ICPC, you call the police. Can you, gentlemen, can you jointly get to the root of this criminality?
What is disturbing there, Mr. Falana, is it's not the first time, by the way, that the Pengassan president would come out in the open.
Of course.
To talk about the military, the entire apparatus of the military being culpable in this matter. Is that to say we are helpless? Who then is supposed to take that on?
No serious state can be said to be helpless. In this age and time, you know, it's like security. You can sit down in your office using drones and satellite dishes to monitor all criminal activities in the country. So I get worried when people, oh, there are some terrorists in the bush or terrorists in the forest. I beg your pardon. This is a modern situation. So if you have not installed CCTV cameras in your city, you have not installed proper technology, you can't combat insecurity. The same thing. I have given you information. You must now ask them. The Petroleum Equalization Fund was to have hosted the software. 17 billion naira was collected. So the question of anybody stealing oil will not have occurred. The question of some criminal elements smuggling fuel across the border will not have occurred because you can monitor every truck. You can monitor and track every ship. Now, there is a company on Lagos-Ibadan Road, 40 kilometer 40. I won't mention the name. I persuaded the managing director, go to the NNPC Abuja. Because he convinced me. And I went there and I saw the equipment that can track pipelines, all the pipelines, oil pipelines in the country. But they are not interested. So now you are now awarded contract of billions of naira to a non-state actor who will now be giving weapons to monitor pipelines. It's crude. It's primitive in this age and time. So these are the problems. So the equipment is in the country to monitor oil pipelines. The software, money was allocated to acquire the software to monitor movement of crude oil and fuel. But the government has not done so. The other one that will interest you, and I said this publicly, between January 2011 and December 2014, the oil that left Nigeria, crude oil that left Nigeria, and discharged in one port in America, Philadelphia port. The difference between what was recorded here and what was recorded in America was 60.2 million barrels of crude oil, valued at $12.7 billion. NIMASA had set up a team of lawyers to help track the fuel that was stolen from Nigeria. So this one, they were now to move and check other ports in America, in China, in the UK, in France, and in other countries that our oil was taken to. The government was not interested. A petition was submitted to the government, to the FCC. Nothing happened. I'm going to just advise now on what to do. So the shipping companies and oil companies involved are known
to the government.
Oh yes, to the government.
So are you saying...
And because of frustration that this matter was not taken up by the agency of the government set up to investigate financial and economic crime. the lawyers involved, a team of lawyers, led by my respected colleague, Professor Fabian Ajogo, had to rush to court to compel the indicted oil companies, powerful oil companies, to pay the government the value of what has been stolen from Nigeria. So the government has the information.
So are you saying that the Senate's monitoring of oil installations, which should be going on about now, and the hearing conducted by the House of Representatives is just for the optics?
No, I say similar hearing. A lot of probes had been carried out in the past, and nothing came out of them. And nothing will come out of this one because it's not their business.
So if government knows this, as you said, is a criminal enterprise, I mean, you quoted...
The government, that's the language of the government.
So that's to say government knows the prime actors of this enterprise. Is that what you're saying?
That's what the government said. That's not my language. I'm using the language of the minister. But what I'm saying, science and technology have left the government behind.
Or that they chose...
Or the government has refused to acquire the necessary tools to prevent fraud. There is fraud.
Mr. Falana?
There's fraud in every country.
To whom was this $17 billion or $1 million that you talked about for the software? To whom was it released?
Ministry of Petroleum Resources. And the software was to be warehoused by the Petroleum Equalization Fund.
You have also said something significant, that, the award of contracts to a former Niger Delta warlord, to monitor pipelines is crude. Why would government choose that over the tracker?
You should be asking the government. But I've just told you there is a company that can sell to the government the equipment to monitor the entire pipelines. And Nigeria is the only oil-producing country, by the way. But Nigeria is the only oil-producing country that has refused to acquire the meter to monitor how much crude is produced. Deliberately.
There are those who would also point, Mr. Falana, to leadership. The question around this is a little befuddling for me, because you've cited this enterprise, as you quoted the minister saying, dating back as far as 2012. So it has traversed one government after the other up until this moment that we're in. So then, is it a problem of leadership or that of bureaucracy or politics?
Like President Obasanjo, the current president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Alhaji Buhari, is the Minister of Petroleum Resources. So the ball stops on his table. So I want to believe that the regime will address this problem. Now that top officials of the government are coming out of frustration to expose the institutionalized fraud in the production of crude oil, in the supply of crude oil, and importation of fuel into the country, and the alleged smuggling to neighboring countries.
Okay.
So I want to believe that with this information oozing out of government quarters, that we may be getting to the root of the matter.
Just one more thing, Mr. Falana. Look at the legal frameworks or instruments that is preparing us for the 2023 elections across board. The Electoral Act, the Constitution, and several others like that. What, for you, are the crucial issues that the laws and agencies must be funded and strengthened to champion in order for us to have a free, fair, credible election in 2023?
In fairness to this regime, the fund earmarked for conducting elections. In other words, the budget of INEC, the fund is released as and when required. So funding is not a problem. But the political will of the ruling class to conduct good elections in Nigeria is a problem. And right now, there are worries. And for me, as a lawyer, there's no country in the world where you don't have fraud with respect to election. You saw it in America when President Trump called up people, electoral officials in Georgia, to rig elections. And when he didn't win the election, he instigated litigation, about 62 cases. But again, unlike here, between November when the election was held and January when you were going to have the inauguration of the president, all the cases were heard and dismissed by the courts. In spite of that, President Trump staged a coup on the 6th of January before the inauguration on the 20th. But for the fact that the institutions in America were strong, the coup will have succeeded. So, and that is what, for me, our people must be vigilant. And so far, civil society organizations, credible voices in the society are monitoring the process. But what is important for us is for INEC to bear its true name, Independent National Electoral Commission, and not allow politicians.
Anything compromising that independence?
There are threats by politicians. And all the officials of INEC involved in such compromise and sabotage must be kicked out of the system. I mean, for instance, the case of Senator Lawan and Machina, in spite of the fact that INEC said in his report, somebody did not take part in the primary. An official of INEC went to court to swear to a false affidavit. In Akwa Ibom, again, arising from the crisis around the emergence of Senator Akpabio, the police recommended that a top official of the ruling party in that state be charged for fraud, for forgery. Nothing has happened. In Ekiti, in Osun State, those who were selling and buying votes, many of them were arrested. Nobody has been charged with any offense. In Osun now, very disturbingly, the INEC gave a report to one of the parties, Beaver's report, specifically to the APC. An election petition was filed. Only for INEC to now go to court and say, we made a mistake. We hadn't synchronized the Beaver's report we gave you. So if such violations of the law continue, we're going to be in trouble. And that is what I mean by saying the INEC chairman in particular must insist on working with staff that are committed to transparent elections. And those who commit electoral offenses, either as staff or politicians or members of the public, will have to be prosecuted.
Mr. Falana, you've just started another topic, but we are out of time.
Honestly. Thank you.
We have to thank you very much for being a part of our conversation this morning. Femi Falana is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Well.